Hola, buenos días. Vamos a hablar rapidito de los usos entre el pretérito versus el imperfecto. Este PowerPoint está en inglés, lo siento, pero yo quería usar inglés versus el español. Make sure you have your note sheet, which you should have downloaded from Schoology through Notability, or you could have printed it off, or you can write it on your own piece of paper, but the note sheet helps you kind of fill it in. Okay, el pretérito, los usos del pretérito. Essentially, when you think of preterite, you're going to think of something that is specific or an exact, specified or an exact event that took place. So when we say it's quantified, we can give it the amount of times or the exact time that it took place. For example, we would have the exact hour that something took place, the exact duration for how long it took place, and how many times something took place. So essentially, it's like translating the ED in English. We watched a Disney movie last Sunday. Vimos una película de Disney el domingo pasado. Okay? Now, even though we specifically state last Sunday, there are times when you can say, yo vi una película de Disney, which is saying I watched a Disney movie. I don't have to specify the time. It equates to I watched it a certain time versus I always watched it. Por ejemplo, obviously I drink pop. That's another situation in terms of using the past tense. An example of that in Spanish, which is kind of a stupid sentence. I drank pop last week. Maybe you quit, so you don't drink it anymore. Yo bebí un refresco la semana pasada. So here we have two indicators of specific time frames. El domingo pasado, la semana pasada. It's a completed action. What does that mean? This is very similar to the previous events, but yo escribí el informe el viernes pasado. So it's saying I wrote the paper last Friday. It's done. I'm not still writing it. It has a beginning and an end, and it indicates the beginning or the end of a specific action. I worked, or they worked for 2 hours. Trabajaron por 2 horas. Terminaste la tarea, okay? When we talk about an indication of a beginning or an end of a specific action, you think about things that are beginning or ending words like comenzar, empezar, terminar, etc. Empezaste el proyecto, okay? You finished it, you started it. When we use preterite, we can specify the moment in which something, an event or an action happened. Fuimos al cine a las 7 de la noche. So we went to the theater at 7. That's a specific time. You can specify the number of times that something happened. I woke up 3 times last night. Now, I said this earlier, but one thing to remember is that sometimes we don't specifically state the specific number of times or when something is done, but it's often implied. Like I might say, for example, if somebody asked me, ¿Qué hiciste anoche? Yo fui al cine. Instead of saying, I went at 7 o'clock. When we talk about a sequence of things that happen, anoche fui al centro comercial, me reuní con mi amiga, paseamos por los 3 pisos y comimos. Okay, so here's a sequence of events. We went, we got together, we met up, we walked around or went around the 3 different floors, and we ate. So those are a sequence of completed events, nothing that was ongoing or a description or any of the sort. It's a condition or a physical, mental, or emotional state that's done. Okay, so this can be confusing oftentimes because when we talk about imperfect, when we talk about emotions and mental states, those are things that are used with the imperfect tense because they're descriptions. But For example, if it's something that you're specifying a specific time or the moment that something changed, you would use preterite. So, for example, estuve triste toda la semana pasada. So, I'm talking about that all last week I was sad. Pero ahora me siento más contenta. Another example might be for if I were to say, the door slammed and I got scared. Okay, that would be an example of preterite because it was a quick moment of change. It wasn't some sort of ongoing feeling. Benjamín se enamoró de ella el año pasado. Ahora le gusta otra chica. Okay, so he fell in love with her last year, but now he's on to the next. Con algunas frases que lo indican. Okay, so these are typically words that we use with the preterite. Okay, however, with that being said, it is not 100% of the time. There are situations you might see these with the imperfect, but for the most part, these are specific time frames, specific number of times when we're going to need to include the preterite. So we have ayer, yesterday, the day before yesterday. Anoche is last night. Esta mañana, this morning. Esta tarde, this afternoon. La semana pasada, el mes pasado, el año pasado, anything pasado. Okay? To say ago, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, 3 years ago. Hace 2 años, 10 meses, etc. Ayer por la mañana, same thing. Ayer por la tarde, ayer por la noche, etc. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. Now, these are a specific amount of times. Because if you say sometimes, that's not specific. De repente is suddenly. So suddenly indicates a change of some sort. And it's specific. Okay. We already went over these. These are things you're going to have to remind yourself and practice, which are how to conjugate appropriately in the preterite. So you have your spelling changes, you have your sole verbs that are IR stem changers, and then the litany of other irregular preterite verbs. El imperfecto. Con el imperfecto, we're going to not specify any time, okay? Although you can say when I was young, but that's not specifying any specific time. Okay, well, if I said last summer, that's a specific time, so that would be preterite. So when we're not specifying a time, or when it's not particularly important, so we speak in general. I already said that time period is not important, and the specific number of times an action occurs is not determined. It's often when we're saying used to or would, when we're thinking that way in the past, okay? So I used to drink pop every week. Or we would watch Disney movies when I was a child. Veíamos películas de Disney cuando era niña. The difference between we would watch versus I watched. It doesn't have a specific beginning or an end. I was working in the restaurant. Doesn't say when, just I was working there. It's an action that's in progress. I was speaking when he entered. The students were writing. It is a continuous action. We were living in Quito. It refers to habitual or repeated actions. So he would drive to school. Think of imperfect in terms of setting the stage or providing the details, the background information. It was a sunny day. She was wearing a green skirt and her hair was flowing. That's all description. That's all going to be using imperfect. Llovía mucho esa noche, estábamos en la cama cuando alguien entró en la casa. Okay, so it was raining a lot. We were in bed when entró, somebody came into the house. This is an interruption. It's a description, as I said. He was in love. It describes a condition or a mental, physical, or emotional state in the past. So oftentimes when we're talking about emotions, physical states of mind, health, etc., things like that, we're going to use the imperfect. You were tired. When we talk about age, a state of being, Nico tenía 17 años. She was married, estaba casada. Expresses the hour, always with the hour. We're going to use the imperfect. And just remember that it's era la una with one, but anything beyond one is eran las siete, etc. Okay, so here we have an example, eran las siete cuando comimos. We have a specific time, which is why this is going to be in the preterite, but with time, because it's not an event, we're going to use imperfect. Indirect discourse, it's essentially when you say what somebody else said. Mi amigo me decía la verdad. He would tell me the truth. Juan said that he had a lot of work. Some of the phrases that we use with imperfect, a menudo is sometimes, is often. A veces is sometimes. Cada día, cada año, cada whatever, like every day, every year, that describes habitualness. Frequently, con frecuencia, and frecuentemente, they're equal, frequently. When I was young, when I was 17, when I was 5, whatever. Once in a while, de vez en cuando. Nunca, never. Siempre, always. Por un rato is for a little bit. Tantas veces, muchas veces, varias veces. When we're talking about veces in terms of just a lot of times or various times, etc., we're going to use imperfect. When we use specific amount of times, like 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, that's preterite. Toda la vida, todo el día, todo el tiempo. Okay, and finally, this was kind of mentioned before, but when we talk about interrupting ongoing events. So, for example, I was reading when she came in. When he or she or I was watching the television, she called me. So actually it'd be when I was watching the television. Okay. Also, kind of when we talk about simultaneous events happening at the same time, while is often used. Cuando could be used as well. Pero while I was reading, she was watching the television. And there should be a comma in there. Lo siento. Okay. Con este es un cuento con el uso de preterito y imperfecto. Trata de elegir la forma correcta, el tiempo verbal correcto para cada situación, okay? Think about what would be the situation. Is it a description? Is it setting the stage? Is it the background information, okay? Is it talking about weather? Weather is what we use with imperfect. So on and so forth. So take a moment to try to decide between one or the other, and then the next slide will give you the answers. So I would press pause because I'm moving on. Okay, here are the answers to the previous one. Okay, era un día fabuloso cuando me desperté. Okay, so here it's describing the day, how it was when I woke up. Okay, because I woke up that day. I got up from my bed, I put on my clothes, and I went to the kitchen. Here's a succession of events. Boom, boom, boom. It was sunny. The birds were chirping, or the birds were singing. This is a description. Iba a ir de compras. So this indicates something that hasn't happened. So it's considered an anticipation. So I was going to go shopping. Or he was going to do this or that. So it's an anticipation of something. Pero no me sentía bien. Okay, so I didn't feel well. There's the feeling, the emotion, the state of being. I was drinking café, tomaba mi café, cuando mi móvil sonó. Okay, so an interruption of some sort of ongoing events that doesn't specify the time. I answered it. Y la voz me decía. So the voice was telling me that there had been an accident. En ese momento, so this is a specific time, I couldn't think. No pude pensar. Salí de mi casa corriendo y subí mi coche. Another succession of events. When I arrived, there had been a crowd. So this había indicates something that was already ongoing before I had even gotten there. Los coches habían chocado. Habían chocado means they had crashed. So they had done that before I arrived. Los conductores estaban heridos. So this is their state of being. Estaban heridos. Me sentía muy desesperada. Me sentía. This is how I felt. You could say probably that me sentí, because of this situation, it changed how I was feeling. So you could say that was a change, and you could probably say me sentí también. I wanted to know what happened. So this wanting to know is something that you wouldn't really put in the quise. ¿Qué pasó? Nadie quería decirme. No one wanted to tell me anything. Ok, hay una actividad en Schoology también, gracias a Dios.